For over 2,000 years, Indian sages, astronomers and philosophers have contemplated the movements of the heavens. From the Vedas to the lunar mansions, from vast cosmic cycles measured in billions of years to shadow beings who swallow the sun itself. And now, it falls to this man. A tradition of immense depth, sacred philosophy, mathematical sophistication and cosmic insight is about to be explained by a buffoon with a teleprompter who still can't pronounce the words properly. Brace yourselves as we enter the fascinating world of Vedic astrology. This week we're taking a brief detour from our journey through the zodiac signs. While we're waiting for Pisces season to kick in, I thought it would be nice to explore a tradition that has been developing for thousands of years, and one that I've recently become very interested in myself. Vedic astrology is part of a living spiritual and philosophical tradition rooted in India. Now, I know that I've got a lot of subscribers in India, so I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise for some of the terrible pronunciations you're going to hear in this video. Please be assured that there is no offence meant, it's just pure incompetence on my part. With that in mind, I'd like to point out that this is not a technical deep dive in any sense. As always, I'm approaching this as a student with the aim of understanding and presenting what I've learned. Also, it's not a comparison exercise to decide which system is right. We're going to see some very close similarities to Western esotericism here. Instead, we're going to be looking at where Vedic astrology comes from, how it developed, and how it understands the relationship between the heavens and human life. Same sky, different traditions. But before we get lost in the stars, let's start off with the basics. What is Vedic astrology? Vedic astrology is traditionally known as Jyotish, a Sanskrit word that means light. In this sense, that's from heavenly bodies, so it's all about illumination, bringing clarity to the patterns of time and life. It developed within the Hindu religion, so it's closely tied to that philosophy. In this sense, it's part of the wider Hindu cultural and spiritual tradition, rather than a belief system on its own. It tends to focus less on things like personality traits or daily horoscopes. Jyotish developed as a way of understanding cosmic order, so it looks at how human life unfolds within larger rhythms of time and meaning. Personality is part of the picture, but Vedic astrology places greater emphasis on life events and cycles. One helpful way to think about Jyotish is like a language of time. Rather than describing who someone is in fixed terms, it's often used to understand how different periods of life unfold, and how we can respond to that with awareness. But where did this tradition start? I think we need to take a look at the history. But just before we do that, we're going to say a big thank you to our friends at Otter Spirit, who make gorgeous gemstone jewellery inspired by astrology. If you're feeling aligned with the cosmos and you'd like to treat yourself to mark the occasion, they've got a full collection for every zodiac sign. I recently got hold of the Divine Masculine Bracelet Pack, so here I've got Bloodstone and Sunstone for confidence and Tiger Eye for strength, which also happens to go nicely with my Capricorn Sun sign. There's just something grounding about having a physical reminder of your intention on your wrist. So if you'd like to check them out, there's a link in the description, along with some discount codes that I'm going to put there. A brief history of Jyotish. To understand where Jyotish comes from, we need to talk about the Vedas. These are amongst the oldest sacred texts of the Hindu tradition, composed in ancient India over several centuries. They contain hymns, ritual instructions, philosophical reflections, and early attempts to understand how the universe is ordered. Jyotish is traditionally counted as one of the Vedanga, the 6 auxiliary disciplines that developed to support the study and performance of these texts. In its earliest form, it was concerned primarily with timekeeping, developing calendars to determine the correct dates for rituals and ceremonies. Long before the 12-sign zodiac became part of the system, Indian astronomers divided the sky into lunar mansions known as NAKSHARTRAS. These are 27 segments tied to the moon's movement across the heavens, and they played a central role in early ritual calendars and timekeeping. This lunar framework formed the backbone of early Jyotish, and it remains an important part of the tradition today. Some of the earliest references to celestial phenomena appear in texts like the Atharva Veda and the CHANDOGYA Upanishad. I'm really trying my best here. Anyway, this is where mythical imagery was used to describe astronomical events. Enter the shadow figure Rahu, believed to be responsible for swallowing the sun and moon during eclipse season. In Puranic mythology, Rahu is described as a shadow being who disguised himself among the gods so he could drink the nectar of immortality. Unfortunately for him, he was exposed by the sun and moon, and then beheaded by Vishnu. However, because he had already tasted immortality, his severed head survived as Rahu, while his body continued as Ketu. From that point on, Rahu is said to pursue the sun and moon in revenge, occasionally swallowing them up, only so they can re-emerge. In astronomical terms, these figures correspond to the two lunar nodes, Rahu as the north node and Ketu as the south. These are the points where eclipses occur. By the early centuries of the first millennium, Indian astronomical texts, such as the Brahma Siddhanta, show just how mathematically sophisticated this system had become. They used detailed calculations to track the movements of the sun, moon and planets, and to construct calendars. Hindu cosmology also came up with a really elaborate and expansive system of cosmic cycles that was measured in billions of years. During this same period, India was in contact with the wider Hellenistic world. Texts such as the Yavana Jataka, which literally translates to the saying of the Greeks, show that astrological ideas were travelling in between the two cultures. The familiar 12-sign zodiac of Aries through to Pisces shows us this. The signs appear in both Greek and Indian traditions, although they were interpreted and integrated in distinct ways. Rather than replacing earlier Indian systems such as the lunar NAKSHARTRAS, the 12-sign zodiac was absorbed and sort of woven into Jyotish. Over time it became part of a uniquely Indian astrological system. Underlying all of this is a foundational Vedic idea known as Bandhu, meaning a bond or correspondence between the microcosm and the macrocosm. In other words, the movements of the heavens and the life of the individual are not seen as separate, but intimately connected. For those familiar with Western esoteric traditions, this may echo the phrase, as above, so below. While the historical roots are different, the idea is similar, that the structure of the cosmos is reflected in the structure of the human being. The Vedas and the Hindu Worldview. Now, to understand why astrology matters in this context, I think it helps to briefly look at the worldview that it emerged from. We talked earlier about the Vedas and how they're amongst the oldest sacred texts in the Hindu tradition. Within that worldview, time isn't seen as a straight line moving from past to future. It's cyclical, seasons return, ages repeat, and life itself is understood as a series of recurring patterns rather than a single linear journey. Astrology in that setting becomes a way of understanding how human life sort of fits into those larger cycles. It places individual experience within a cosmic rhythm, rather than treating it as isolated or random. This is where ideas like Dharma come in. Dharma is often translated as duty, but it's much broader than that. It's about the right way of meeting life, given who you are and what stage of life you're at. It's not a fixed rule book, and it isn't the same for everyone. Dharma changes as circumstances change and responsibilities shift. In that context, astrology matters because it offers a way of reflecting on timing. So that's when certain actions are appropriate, when transitions are happening, and how you can live your life in harmony with the wider order of things. Same sky, two systems. When people compare Vedic astrology with Western astrology, one of the first things they notice is that the zodiac signs don't always line up. Someone who's an Aries in one system might appear as a Pisces in the other. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos on astrology, you'll know that I've talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. We just need a rough primer on how the two systems came to be. This difference comes down to how the zodiac is measured. Vedic astrology uses what's known as a Sidereal Zodiac, which is based on the visible constellations, so that's the fixed stars in the sky. The tropical zodiac, used mostly in modern Western astrology, is tied to the seasons. It begins at the vernal equinox, the moment in spring when day and night are roughly equal. It's from that point that the zodiac is divided into 12 sections. The sidereal zodiac also divides the sky into 12 30-degree signs, but instead of anchoring them to the equinox, it aligns them with the fixed stars. By the way, none of this is to say that sidereal is exclusive to Jyotish. Many Western systems use it too, but the tropical method is much more common in the West. Importantly, in the tropical system, Aries does not mean the constellation of Aries. It means the part of the sky aligned with the spring equinox. It's a seasonal marker rather than a star-based one. The sidereal zodiac, by contrast, keeps its alignment with the background stars. It attempts to anchor the signs to the constellations themselves rather than to Earth's seasonal cycle. The reason these two systems no longer line up is due to a slow astronomical phenomenon known as axial precession. The Earth doesn't spin perfectly upright, it wobbles slightly on its axis over thousands of years. Because of that wobble, the position of the equinox gradually shifts against the backdrop of the fixed stars. This happens very slowly, roughly 1 degree every 72 years, but over the centuries it adds up. Today the difference between the tropical and sidereal zodiacs is about 23 degrees, and it'll be around 24,000 years before it's back to where it started. Jyotish developed in a tradition where maintaining alignment with the fixed stars made sense within its own internal logic. Both traditions emerged from careful observation of the sky, but they eventually chose different starting points from which to measure it. So the sky hasn't changed, the stars are still where they've always been. What shifted is the reference point. Same sky, two different ways of looking at it.
Kepi's Quest.
What we've looked at today is only the surface of a very deep tradition. Jyotish is much more than a different zodiac system. It's part of a worldview that links ritual, philosophy, astronomy, mythology and lived experience into a single framework. But perhaps the most important idea is that underlying principle of Bandhu, the connection between the microcosm and the macrocosm, the sense that human life and cosmic movement are not separate stories but chapters in the same book. For those of you who are more familiar with Jyotish than I am, especially my viewers in India, I hope I've treated it with the respect it deserves. And if I've mispronounced half the Sanskrit, as I suspect I have, then I can only apologise and hope that it hasn't marred your enjoyment of the video. Anyway, this has been an introduction rather than a conclusion. There are entire lifetimes of study behind this tradition. I've just tried to open the door, but it's been really fascinating learning about this. Next time we'll return to our journey through the zodiac as Pisces season arrives. But for now, whether you're measuring from the equinox or the fixed stars, we're all still part of the same cosmos. As it says in the Rig Veda, truth is one. The wise speak of it in many ways.
Thank you for joining us on this brief celestial detour. May your timings be fortunate, your insights be luminous, and your stars align just when you need them to. Until next time.